Well, we travel from Bern to the site of the tunnel they're about to build. Stevens Pass is named for John F. Stevens, an engineer in the employ of the Great Northern Railway. He had located the route the railway took over the Rockies, Marias Pass, and he had found the route over his eponymous pass. Not an ideal route, but workable. And James Jerome Hill had little time to waste. This narration can't help but be a bit anachronistic, as there were 3 different attempts to establish an acceptable route over the Cascades. We are interested in the first route, the path Mark Twain and Company traveled in 1895. This first route over Stevens Pass required 8 switchbacks, sharp curves, steep grades of up to 4%, and a crew of 3,000 men working 12 hours a day for 2 years to complete. The final spike was driven on January 6, 1893. From here, we back into the first switch. Now we travel up Stevens Creek and make a sharp turn and back up the west side of the canyon to Nason Creek. Mark Twain traveled this route August 8, 1895, riding the Great Northern Railway from Spokane to Seattle. He rode on the engine with the engineer, who was delighted. From this point, we back up on over Stevens Pass to a point above Wellington. Soon after the Great Northern reached Seattle, much of America suffered the panic of 1893. It was devastating to many established businesses, but proved a boon to the new businesses along the line. J.J. Hill had been very busy extending the advice of Horace Greeley to continue on west. This helped provide a renewed supply of labor to develop, among other places, Skykomish Valley, just west of the Switchbacks. Now we move forward again along the Twain River. And we're back up to a point above Wellington again. Now we switch back around Wellington. The earlier transcontinental railroads had employed cheap Chinese labor, upsetting unemployed whites, resulting in the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1881, a federal law barring Chinese from entering the United States to work on railroads. Then back around to the Twain River again. Now we're down to the third curving switch and on into Wellington. From Wellington, travel along to Martin Creek. Hill had been negotiating with the Japanese. He wished to sell them U.S. goods and import silk and tea. It's also possible he was able to procure cheap Japanese labor, although this is not documented. The 1900 census mentions 47 Japanese workers in Wellington and Martin Creek, but it does not mention the town of Nippon. Whether a town was located for mining or for the railroad, they all had sawmills. There was a definite local market for lumber, but J.J. Hill knew there was a much bigger market in the East. Hill knew he could only make money if he could fill his freight cars in both directions. In addition to products from the Orient, he recognized the Great Northern could transport lumber east on cars that would otherwise travel empty. He convinced his friend and neighbor, Frederick Weyerhaeuser, to look to the west with him. We crossed the Martin Creek Trestle into Horseshoe Tunnel. Now we go on back down Martin Creek and on into Scenic. Even after construction, the railroad remained labor-intensive. The large crews needed to build the line became large maintenance and snow removal crews. The route over Stevens Pass was hardly ideal, with 8 switchbacks and sections of track above 3,000 feet. In a serious snow belt. Snaking rail cars and 8-car units up and down the switchbacks required crews working around the clock. From Scenic, we're on down with Clear Road to Sky Comish. Work began on the first Cascade Tunnel in 1897 and was completed in 1900. It relieved the railroad of the switchbacks, but brought its own set of problems, particularly the exhaust from the steam engines, causing several deaths in the tunnel and numerous close calls. By 1909, the tunnel had become electrified and electric engines pulled the trains through the tunnel, but the line was still in dangerous snow country. In March of 1910, the most disastrous avalanche in U.S. history occurred at Wellington. 96 people died when an avalanche crashed into a stalled train. In 1929, the Great Northern Railway completed the construction of the second Cascade Tunnel, 7.8 miles long and still in operation. This tunnel had disastrous effects on the town of Leavenworth, bypassed by the new route. John Maloney was 33 years old at the time he met John F. Stevens, the only one of 5 boys in his family to go west. Maloney labored in mines, prospected in at least 4 states, operated a copper claim in Utah for 8 years, and went on to Alaska, where he floated the Yukon River to the sea in a moose skin canoe looking for copper. Since it was too late in the year to go back inland, he took passage on a steamer to Seattle. After his job as an axeman on a survey crew out of Bellingham ran out, he moved on to the head of Lake Chelan, where he located a ranch. By the time he met John Stevens, Maloney was a experienced wilderness traveler with an eye for opportunity. When Stevens chose to locate the Great Northern Railway along the South Fork of the Sky Comish River, Maloney recognized his main chance. He staked a claim along the wide, flat stretch of river bottom along the route the rails would take in 1891 and began to clear land. He knew the building of the railroad would require all manner of support systems and positioned himself to provide them. The place he claimed became Sky Comish.